Okay, good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome to the final calf crop meeting of the series. I'm just trying to, here's my screen here. So yeah, welcome along all. Basically similar format to all the previous meetings. Just a quick reminder, most of you will have seen this before, but really what we're trying to do here, we've been funded through Universities Innovation Fund to basically get research messages from the research institutes across Scotland, particularly SRUC, get those messages out to you guys, to farmers, to where it really matters. And for me, as a business consultant, I'm always really keen to see us getting more calves in the ground, producing more calves, and ultimately making more money and helping the sustainability of the whole industry. So that's why we're here. What have we done? And it's really quite it's amazing to think that we're now at the end of this process. We're in the final meeting, but we've looked basically right through the production cycle. Starting off at calving time in the early spring, and now we're right through into weaning, and then today we're looking at a post-weaning management of those cows, and how do we maintain those cows through the winter, in order to get them back towards calving and where we need them to be for a successful calving in 2022. So that's the process. The team, same team again. We've got two from SRUC Vets, Alwyn and Tim, and then we've got myself and Karen from SEC Consulting as well. So that's who we are. And tonight, meeting 7 is all about setting up your cows. So Karen is going to once again look at nutrition and look at management of of your cows in and around weaning time and beyond weaning time. And then Tim will look at health and health planning at weaning time as well. And then, as usual, we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. And that's probably more than ever this meeting, the final meeting of the series, there's plenty scope to ask questions, and we could probably expand that out a wee bit if time allows. So certainly we'll try and have as much time for questions at the end as we can. As I mentioned, it's your meeting, so we need questions from the floor, and that allows me to kind of steer the discussion through the question and answer session. Don't be shy and just pinging those questions straight into the box when you come up with them. I can't guarantee we'll get through them all, but we'll certainly get through as many as possible. But yeah, use the question and answer function, or even send a chat message to me, or however you want to do it, but don't be shy in asking a question. So actually that takes me to the end of my initial section. So I will stop sharing and just hand over to Karen.
Okay, right, I'll just get started. Welcome everybody to the last calf crop meeting. I'm going to talk about back-end nutritional management of cows. This completes the circle really. We started off with our meetings in January this year, and it's good to talk about cow nutritional management at this time of year, nice and early before it's not too late for spring calving and getting them in the right frame that we want them to be in. So as always with these meetings, everyone's situation is different, and I would just encourage you, if you can, just think about your own farms and maybe what small changes you can make in your own situation that'll make a difference to your output of calves for 2022. Okay, so the nutritional considerations that we are going to give for the calf crop for 2022. We've talked about weaning so we're sort of at the weaning stage. We're ending calf crop 2021 and looking ahead to how many calves we can get on the ground for next year. So the 3 main aspects we're going to look at are cow condition, feed planning for the winter, and a bit of reflection and change. And then Tim's going to talk a bit about the health side of things. So the main, I'll just flip back to that slide there, the first one on cow condition, the main, it is really the main crux of the whole job. I mean, keeping an eye out on cow condition the whole year round, and if you lose condition too much or have far too much condition, it can cause all sorts of problems. So cow condition, as in with sheep as well, it's extremely important, and it gives you a feel of how things are going health-wise and how things are going nutritionally. So rules of thumb that we have for that is to keep them between a condition score 2.5 and 3.5, and if you're looking for guidelines on these. There are guidelines on the internet. I'll come across with them in a minute. But so between conditions 2.5 and 3.5 at all points of production, what we'll probably find is a lot of cows will be coming in from the summer in pretty good condition, which is actually no bad thing, because it means that we can take a little bit of condition off these cows. It can save a little bit on winter feed, and we've got plenty of time from now until springtime to get them the right condition for calving time. So the two circles that I've highlighted on the picture there, so you've got the one on the right hand side is the transverse processes on the spine, and at condition score 2.5 you want to fuel them with moderate pressure. So if you put them pressure on them and they feel nice and rounded, but you can feel them, that's about a condition score 2.5, and you're also looking for not too much fat over the tail head area. At 3.5, you know, when you put more pressure on it, you can just feel them, and if you can't feel them at all, it means the cows are in too good a condition, so a condition score 4 to 5. Now, I know it's really tricky in some cows, you know, such as some of the natives, maybe some of the Anguses and things. It's really hard to get that condition off them, and you'll always have those cows that are the fat cows. And if they've got a bit of dairy breeding in them, or you know, some other you know, breeds like that, then they can always look a bit thinner, because they're carrying more condition internally rather than, or fat internally rather than on the outside of them. So I think what I'm trying to get at is make sure that you can see what you would like your herd to look like at the point of calving, and at weaning time it's a perfect time to have a look at the whole herd and body condition them, and if possible separate these cows and feed them according to that condition. So if you've got fat cows, you know, think about now planning to get condition off them for calving time. And as sort of the old saying goes, if you come out on New Year's Day, you really want all the cows to be in a condition that you're happy with for calving. If you come out on New Year's Day and you think, golly, there's some really thin here and really fat here, we're in a bit of trouble. So I think planning now to get that condition right, and whether you're out wintering or in wintering, you know, decisions can be made at that point, and it really does make a big difference to the point of calving. So just to see some pictures there on the left hand side of different conditions. Obviously the one on the left is extremely fat, but just to tell you this, it all takes time, these things. So for a cow, as about 13% of his live weight equates to 1 body condition score. So for a 650 kilo cow, that's around 85 kilos. And it takes time if you're doing that. I mean, if you took it off quickly, it can be done, but it's not terribly good for the health of the cow. If you think of yourself, if you were taking weight off very quickly, it's not terribly good for your health. Probably want to aim about 0.5 kilo a day. So that would be about 170 days. So it takes a good bit of time to take that condition off gently in these cows. So my advice is to you to seek nutritional advice on to do this. Get some rations set up at the beginning of the winter, get a plan in place. It really doesn't take long, and you know, hopefully you'll get easier calvings due to having the cows in the right condition, and also making better use of the on-farm resources. So you're making better use of feeding, making these cows work as well. So there's some of the resources at the bottom there. That's QMS YouTube condition scoring. There's 2 parts there. Basil Lohman has done 2 small videos which are excellent, and giving you some guidance on how to condition score. And there's also the nadis.org.uk condition scoring guide in beef herds as well, just for some extra guidance. And it's not something you really need to do, you know, taking them in specially to do it. I mean, just when you're weaning cattle or when you're handling them, and it's great just to see the difference in the condition throughout the year as well. So if there's any drastic changes in condition across the herd or in particular individuals, you know that there's perhaps a problem on the case, so you can get on top of these issues quite early. As I said last in the Tuesday night's webinar with the weaned calves, the base ration is everything, and that's, you know, whether, you know, no matter what stock you're dealing with, whether you're dealing with cows, whether you're dealing with young stock, sheep or any other ruminants, the base ration, the forage is absolutely vital, because that is the mainstay of the ration. So whether you're feeding haylage, deferred grazing, forage crops, silage, straw, hay, or any other kind of forages, it's really important to know the dry matter of these, energy, protein, and to get the mineral content. On the right hand, so the left hand screen there, you'll see some a weigh scale of weighing bales, and I think it's really important if you can get a handle on you know, how much your bale weighs and how many cows that's going to do, because there's such a variation in dry matter of bales, and again, that comes down to the nutrition that's in there, the water part of the ration versus the dry part of the ration, which is actually the part that's useful to the animal. So getting a silage analysis and just making sure you've got a handle on that rather than guessing. It's a few months can go down the line and you don't really see the differences until you go on holiday and come back and think, God, the cows are really fat. So really pay attention to the forage part of the ration. So quality check for dry matter, energy and protein, quantity of the feed and basic quantity of that on the quality of the silage and of the stage of pregnancy. At the early stages of pregnancy, the cows are needing very little more than maintenance and take into account their condition. So if you've got cows that are expecting twins, cows that are thinner, you maybe want to feed them a bit extra, and fitter cows, you may want to take the weight off them. So just these wee changes can make a big difference to the point of calving. And basic supplements that you're giving them on the quality and the quantity of the forage fed, for example, straw-based diets, you're going to need a lot more mineral and a higher quality mineral than you are maybe on a silage-based ration. What I would also encourage you to do is a feed budget as well. With the late spring there, everyone's sort of used up their storages of silage and straw and things, and now replenished them well. But some people are reporting lower yields of silage than they wanted. They've got less bales on the ground. However, these bales might be drier as well. So get an analysis of these bales, count them up and see how much dry matter you have to feed the animals. And once you have done a tot up and got rations done, this is a really simple spreadsheet which I can pass on to anyone who would like it as well. So we've got the list of available potential feeds at the top there, the animal groups and the start date of feeding and the end date of feeding, so the number of days, and the actual ration in the third green box down there. And this gives an idea, calculates an idea of the amount that's required per these group of animals, and how many tons are needed for the winter. And using the tons that are available at the top and the tons that are required at the bottom, we can see the balance. So whether we're in shortfall or in, if there's a deficit or there's too much, and then, if we need to buy them and how much we need to buy and how much that's going to cost. So I love this spreadsheet because I think it's a really quick way at the start of the year, once you've had rations done, just to check that you have enough there, and it gives you an idea of what you need for the winter, and you can phone suppliers as well and plan ahead. So really simple thing to do. So if anyone would like a copy of that, I can easily pass that on. But I think just taking that time at the start of the winter will give you peace of mind, and you know what the cows, hopefully get the cows in the right condition, and you're taking a wee bit more control of everything. So my final topic here is just going to be a bit about reflection and change. So think about, how did your last calving go and what could be improved in terms of nutrition? So how have the calves performed? So have they had enough nutrition, and perhaps where have things, if things have gone wrong, where have they gone wrong? So, have these calves not had enough milk? Has there not been enough grass? What other areas could be improved on? And for a key performance indicator, we'd be looking for a cow to wean at least 50% of her body weight of calf age 20, when the calf's age 200 days. So for an example of that, if you had a calf and it was 6 months and 3 days old, so it's 183 days when you weaned it, and you weighed it, and it was 280 kilos at 183 days, we'd adjust that to 200 days. So that would be 306 kilos. It would be if the equivalent was 200 days old. And if you have all your calves adjusted to 200 days of age, then it'll give you an idea of how your cows are performing. If you want to take this one step further, if you weigh the cows that they've come from and take the weight of the calf, divide it by the cow's weight and times by 100 to get a percentage of the cow's weight that the calf is. So you can see in this case, if the cow weighs 700 kilos, she's weighing weaning 43% of her body weight in calf, which is really quite typical. Actually, it's very it's good if you're meeting the 50%, but it's a great target to meet. So I think also another way of looking at it is to have a figure in your mind where you would like your calves weaning weight to be, and when you've got your list there, you can start identifying cows that are maybe not weaning the calf weight that you would like, and have a look and see what are the reasons for this. Are they late born? born? Are they, you know, is there some other issues going on there with nutrition, or the cow is just not being very productive? And I think it's a great way of then deciding which cows you're going to keep in your herd as well. So if a cow 2 years running is weaning light calves, she's not overly productive, you not want to breed from her, and she maybe go down the road. So I think it's really simple stuff you can look at, but it does take a wee bit of time, but it's really worth having a look through. So look at why some are lighter, and it could be milk yield, cow condition, health, but it'll give you an overall view of how nutrition is going for the cow and the calf. And having a look at that at this time of year also allows you to make decisions for calving of 2022. Where can things be improved? So my top tips again are think about cow condition all year round. Avoid very fat and very lean cows. The condition of the cow will affect calf survival and that of the next pregnancy as well. So really thin cows at calving time are going to affect calf survival, and they're going to affect the following pregnancy, so your calf crop for 2023. So really think about cow condition now when they're coming off the summer and into the winter, and try and get that right for calving time. Know your forage quality, that's key to getting the cow condition right, maximising your farm resources. Mineral wise, as I said on Tuesday, know the farms, the facts of the farm and what they're likely to be deficient in, and don't be driven by assumption or marketing or looking for a quick fix. As somebody was saying to me the other day, if you had a broken arm or a sore arm, you wouldn't look to give yourself some painkillers or some morphine or something. You would look to find out the cause of the pain. So look to find out what the causes are. Don't look for a quick fix, and look at the whole picture and reflect on the previous year. Think about last year's calving and last year at this sort of time, what went right, what went wrong, and the good old saying, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So do make little changes, positive changes that can help your calf output for 2022. And that's me. Okay, I'll happy to take any questions at the end when Tim's finished his talk as well.
Excellent, thank you very much, Karen. Can you unshare?
Yes, I can.
Yep. Thanks. And now basically just straight over to Tim, if you're there, Tim.
Very good. Okay. Thank you, Karen, and thanks, Robert, and thanks to all of you for coming along to this last evening. I hope there's something of interest and thought-provoking in the next 10 or 15 minutes here, and looking forward to the chance to have a bit of discussion toward the end. So Karen's covered nutrition, and I'll now think about cow health and to some extent herd health at weaning time. The first thing to highlight is certainly the major health risk around weaning is on the calf. It's the calf that's at greatest danger just in the next few weeks and months, really. And Alwyn took us through that very well on Tuesday, and his sort of key points were that we have to manage to minimise stress on the calf, manage the environment that the calf's going to land in post-weaning, and manage the immune status of that calf, particularly vaccination for respiratory disease. So the major health risk is focused on the calf. And actually, if we look at this lovely picture here, the cow is quite different. She's going to be slightly upset at weaning time, but she's really actually entering a much easier time. She starts to gets a moment to catch her breath, and settles down a bit. And weaning's, I would say, it's the end of her season, isn't it? That's when she just takes the foot off the pedal. She's done her job. She's weaned a calf. She's hopefully back in calf, and she gets a bit of a rest. So it's a different situation for the cow as opposed to the calf. If we go back to January, this is a slide we used in January, and at that point, that same cow was pregnant and maybe in the shed, and certainly wherever she was, we were investing in her. She was eating money, and we were spending on her in the hope that she would do just two things for us: one, wean a big calf, and secondly, get back in calf quickly. That was our challenge to her, and we felt that if she could do those two things, then we were in a pretty strong position to see a return on our investment. So here's our cow here. She's now where we are, 19th of August or whatever. We're probably most of us towards, weeks away from weaning, for lots of us, certainly towards the end of the breeding season, and she comes up toward the end of the season. So for us then, if we are, and given we're on this talk and the premise of the whole series is improving technical performance, if we are committed to that, then there's a very short but absolutely essential must-do list in terms of herd health just at this time of year. So the must-do list now for us is to count and weigh our calves. That's absolutely critical, and Karen took us through that nice example there of 200-day weights and what we can do with it. So we have to do that. We have to PD our cows and heifers, preferably as soon as possible. And those two bits of information have to be written down. We have to write that down and record it. It's the only way we can fairly assess how this season has been, and then we can close it off and say, okay, that's what we achieved. That's how many calves, that's what the weight of the calves were, and that's our PD results. And that is the end of our 2021 season. And much like the cow, we draw breath and we stop, and hopefully we get a wee break and time to reflect. But it doesn't take very long before we start thinking, okay, as Karen has said, let's start thinking about next season then. And the targets are going to look really, really similar, just slightly different, as in now, this poor old cow who thinks she's on her holidays, we're going to say to her, well, actually, next year I want you to wean slightly more calves and slightly bigger calf, and I'd like you to get back in calf a wee bit quicker, please. And that's kind of the whole ethos, isn't it, of continuous improvement and constantly striving just to find marginal gains year on year on year. And my point here is that for this pregnant cow, when we think about cow health at weaning, it's absolutely focused on next year's targets now. This season is done, including fertility, and we now want to take our pregnant cows, take those PD positive cows, and immediately think, okay, what can I now start managing in terms of health to hit my targets for next year? So we'll focus on the PD positive cows and heifers, and I'm putting forward an argument here that in terms of herd health and key performance indicators, they're probably the most useful denominator to work with. I think traditionally we often think of cows to the bull as our start point, and then we carry it around from there. But I think actually for health planning, it's a bit simpler and easier, and makes more sense to start just with the PD positive cow and go from there. So the PD positive cow, as we've said, has 3 targets. How many calves can you wean? What weight can you get those calves? And how can you get back in calf? And by doing that, it's not a huge change, is it? But by doing that, we're sort of saying the fertility season just finishing, when bulls are due to come out or have just come out, that was last year. That was, whether that's been good, bad, or indifferent, how well we have done was influenced by and controlled by what we did last year. And there's nothing we can do about that now. So I think of fertility as the last point in the season, not the start point. And therefore, our PD positive cow is the first thing we look at, and we give her some targets. So as I've said, cow health at weaning is completely focused on maximizing our performance metrics for next year. This year's finished and done. We sign that off and we move on to think about next year. By taking that approach and that mindset, that's essentially dynamic health planning. That's starting a dynamic health plan, and weaning is definitely the best time to think about trying a dynamic health plan if you've not done one before. If you don't know what I'm talking about and you'd like to know more, there's a webinar or a talk online by the Farm Advisory Service available here, so you can punch in animal health is wealth and find that talk, and it'll go around the whole cycle as to how to do it. But the basics of it are that it's farmer-led. So you do this for yourself, for your own business. It's not something you buy from a consultant or you buy from a vet or anything else. It's something you do for yourself. You can get your nutritionist and you can get your vet to help you along the way, but it's a farmer-led process. And the first thing you have to do is set those very specific targets. And as we've suggested, good ones would be calves weaned, calf weight, and PD positive animals going back in calf. So we do it ourselves. We sit down and we set those very specific annual targets for next year. And then we just have a think, okay, over the next days, over the next weeks, and over the next months, not too far ahead, maybe just 3 or 4 months, what might stop me nailing those targets? What can I do now? What can I focus on right now that will help me move towards those targets, or achieve or even beat those targets that I'm setting myself for next year? What might stop me achieving them? What's going to trip me up? And if we can identify things that might trip us up and act now to stop that or mitigate that, then we've got a really good chance that we'll put things in our favor to have a highly productive year. So it's answering that question: what may stop us achieving these targets, and what things can we do in the next few months? That's what we'll focus on then, just for the next 10 minutes, by covering these suggestions here. If you do this, if you sit down yourself to do this for your own herd, you might well come up with a different list to mine, but this is just food for thought to get us started. I'll start with when should we pull the bull, and I am talking about maybe some of us early calving or already have a tight calving window. The bull will already be out, but for some of us, we'll just be grumbling around that sort of 11, 12, 13 week mark now, and maybe thinking, okay, should the bull be coming out? And my point here is that decision, of course, it can influence how many PD positives potentially this year, but it's also going to influence health and fertility performance next year. And so we learned from Alwyn again on Tuesday, and the evidence for this is pretty good, but those late born smaller calves are by and large always, when we look at it, at increased risk of disease, almost always at increased risk of disease and death. So in terms of calf health and calf survival, those late born calves are pretty tricky and pretty high risk. And if we can take them out, and our goal is to have well grown thriving calves, then that can be a step towards helping us achieve that. Likewise, we also know those late calving cows, the ones that might get in calve with the extra few weeks with the bull, those late calving cows are also slower to get back in calve. And we see that this is the data we looked at earlier in the year from UCD, nearly 5,000 animals looking at month of calving and how quickly they get back in calve. This doesn't account for seasonality, so we're saying from her own calving date, how quickly does she get back in calve? And we know that those ones that are moving through the season and calving later, and we might nip them just with an extended bulling period, they're infertile cows, and they're going to slow down our fertility again next year. So we can have a positive influence potentially both on calf health and on fertility next year by thinking about just bringing that bull out a wee bit quicker this year. There's a difficulty around early PDs in our spring systems when we're busy with field work and lots of other things going on at this time of year, and I really appreciate that. But likewise, there's a very strong argument for getting an early PD done. If we PD now, roughly now, around the time we might be considering pulling the bull, we can accurately evaluate how the initial weeks of breeding have gone. That might hopefully give us confidence to let's just tighten up by a week or a few days or whatever we think we can manage, but it'll give us information to do that confidently. We could get better aging of fetuses, so we can see which ones are going to calve more accurately through the calving season, and we've got a good opportunity to also detect twins. And we've talked a lot earlier in this series about managing twins and nutrition of twin-bearing cows. If we can get those cows identified with some early PDs, then that's a big help. So certainly food for thought. There's a strong argument for thinking about an early PD and using that as a tool to just put things in our favour for a good season next year. Body condition wise, Karen's really nailed this and done an excellent job, and there's a wee bit of overlap here, but just a reminder, again, demonstrated nicely by this UCD data, that cows that are thin by the time they calve down take a lot longer to get back in calve, and the window of opportunity to investigate and improve poor condition starts now at weaning, and Karen's done a super job of taking us through that from a nutrition point of view, and clearly that's critical. Twin bearing cows we've just mentioned, very important, but there's a number of health issues which can also cause poor body condition, despite adequate nutrition. So you can do all of your sums and your feed budget and your careful ration and your excellent forage, and we still end up with thin cows, and those diseases are just crippling, economically crippling, and undermining our whole effort. So we really have to have thought through and a robust control program in place for things like Johne's disease, liver fluke, gut parasites, lameness, and some other chronic diseases. So now's a great time to just touch base. We're probably all already doing things on these various topics, but let's just get them lined up, thought through and planned for. When are we doing our Johne's screen? When's the best time for a liver fluke treatment in my case? Do I need a gutworm treatment in these cattle? Questions like that can be answered now and planned for through the back end, and that's when bringing your vet in is probably going to pay dividends. Again, weaning and this back end of the year, another great time to think about other endemic diseases potentially in the herd. They may not directly affect body condition, but they certainly have the capacity to infect both fertility and risk of abortion, and to some extent respiratory disease. So I've listed a few here: IBR, Neospora, Lepto, Salmonella. It's a scary list, isn't it? It's not nice to think about, but it's reasonably easy to just grab 5 or 6 bloods. Let's just learn a wee bit more about our herd. Do we have these things, or are we clear and we need to watch what we're buying in? Probably a good time of year to do that. And God willing, I hope we don't see too many abortions this coming back end in winter, but we always see some. And it's just that reminder, if we have an abortion and we've got the fetus and the placenta available to us and they're fresh, that's a great opportunity to learn something about some of these common infectious diseases or feed-borne infections. So if you've got that material to hand, then turn a bad situation into a good one and learn something from it. Have your vet sample them to investigate, or get them into your regional lab. Not a bad time of year as well to think about looking at trace element status. Karen touched on this very well. And cows have been at grass. They've been at grass for some time, and for lots of us, they won't have had much in the way of supplementation and minerals. And so a trace element screen now gives us a pretty honest view of where our forage and pasture is at. And so again, fairly simple: 5 or 6 cattle when they're coming through the crush anyway, and get some tail bloods and look for copper, selenium and iodine. If they're good, then that's another thing we don't need to worry about for next year. If we find actually they're low, then that could have a negative impact on fertility, could have a negative impact on calf health, and something we could plan for and manage better next year. So if we've not done it for a while, if we're not sure where our baseline is, then food for thought that the cow can tell us a lot about trace element status from pasture at this time of year. And then the last slide then, we'll think about risks coming from nutrition and accommodation, which might undermine our carefully thought through targets. So where are these dry cows going to be over the next weeks and months? And some things to think about is, are we going to expose them to an abortion risk? The major risk of abortion in beef cattle comes from poorly preserved forages and the environment, so dirty water, dirty bedding, straw bales with muck and fungus. That's our major risks. Can we do anything to protect these cattle? Can we give them the best forage? Can we make sure the water troughs are in good order now, etc.? Avoid badly poached fields, etc. To think about abortion. Are they going to be exposed to a specifically high parasite risk, going on to previously grazed, very wet ground? Is that going to carry a higher liver fluke risk than previous years? If they're going to be put onto hill ground that we've not used before, and they're maybe naive to ticks, is there a risk from tick infection, tick infestation and diseases with it? Again, food for thought. And then one specific one, just this next few months is the major risk period for when we're feeding very high proportion silage diets and causing or leading to congenital dwarfism. So we see these dwarf calves every year. There does seem to be a bit of variation. We see more one year and less another. And in all cases, the major risk factor is feeding a silage based or an entirely from silage during the middle pregnancy, the early and mid pregnancy. So the typical advice would be that we try and have on a dry matter basis at least 30% of the ration coming from non-ensiled feedstuffs, straw, hay, a wee bit of barley, whatever, just something else other than silage. And certainly if we've seen these dwarf calves before, then this is the time to plan for that and speak to Karen and make sure that our diet is low risk for congenital dwarfism next year. So those are my thoughts on what we might think through when we sort of risk plan the next 3 or 4 months. My key points to finish: we've got a very short but absolutely essential must-do list for the next few weeks. Count and weigh the calves, PD the cows and heifers as early as possible, and write those results down to close off last year and draw a line under how well we've done. Then set our targets for next year based on our pregnant cattle. Based on those pregnant cows, how many calves can we wean, what calf weight can we achieve, and how quickly and how well can we get them back in calf. And then don't go too far ahead. We don't need to go around the whole year, but just the next 3 or 4 months, what specific actions might be available to us to tip things in our favour. Thinking about, should the bull be coming out a couple of weeks early, a week early, thinking about diseases that might impact on body condition, other endemic diseases, and those risks from feed and the environment. And that's me. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Tim. Could you unshare your screen and we'll get everybody up now for some questions. There's a few good questions have come in, but again, plenty more scope.
Yeah.
For more.
Stop share. I found it. Sorry. Yeah.
Excellent. Perfect. Cool. So first question, as usual, goes to the first speaker. So Karen, a couple of points about fit cows and fit cows, good silage, and deer straw. What are the options? I know you did kind of touch on it, but what are the options realistically to pair some condition off these cows if we're in a, it's looking like an expensive winter? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
There we go. How often do we do that? I know. I think it's really tricky if you've got really good quality silage and you're trying to take condition off these cows, because what they want to eat voluntarily is so much more than what they need nutritionally. So straw is the obvious thing to dilute that, but obviously it's very expensive as well. So I think the main message is to get your forage analysed so you know what you're dealing with to start with, and come up with a plan on how to feed these cows. I think if it's very good quality silage, it's really tricky, and we're trying to find some poorer silage for these particular cows, or stick them out on a hill or something if they're particularly fat. But
and that's a question, I suppose, is that there's a lot, the country's full of good hay as well. Does good hay help in that scenario to dilute?
Yeah. I mean, good hay is still, like average silage or poorer silage. So I think ad lib good hay would put on weight, but restricted good or average hay is perfectly fine. So I think if you can have a way of restricting that hay to fit cows, and it's very tricky if you've got a ring feeder and you're expecting 20 cows just to kind of help themselves and things. If you've got loads of space, it's fine, but there's things you can do, like just sort of limiting those cows, so if you could, if there's enough protein in the hay or the silage that you're given, you could alternate days with straw. I think just speaking to somebody about it and coming up with a plan is the best course of action.
And what about if we're really, we're restricting with nothing else to put in and we're just taking good quality silage? What about feeding small amounts twice a day? Is there an issue there, underfeeding them but doing it regularly?
Yeah, you can underfeed them to a certain point, and then it becomes a bit of a welfare thing. So you don't want to feed any less than, I would say, 8.5 kilos of dry matter, and that probably doesn't mean anything to a farmer listening, but it's, if you can seek some advice on that. Twice a day is certainly better than once a day, just because you're spreading that out a bit. but you also want to keep a certain, cows are quite good at adjusting to lower dry matter intakes. They can adjust quite well, but there is a limit where you can go too low on that.
Yeah. And it's also the thing you mentioned there as well, the role of outside as well. If we can, certainly not all farms allow it, but if that really fit group can be outside for longer, and delay weaning for longer, there's scope there to pair a bit of condition off. But really, that's the whole point of today, is to forward plan and try and make sure we're in a reasonable position.
And 9 times out of 10, there's something you can do about it. So it's you can just, if you get a wee plan in place now, rather than just sort of thinking, oh, we'll worry about it later. I think that's the key.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks.
Robert, can I just add one thing? If we're talking about poorer quality silage, we want to be aware of, making sure it's not spoiled silage, and being aware of the risk of that. So I suppose we're talking about lower quality, lower nutrition quality silage, and the risk is with feeding spoiled silage is there's a risk to the calf that she's carrying, isn't there? And the risk of abortion, particularly later on towards spring.
So that actually, excellent question, Alan, because that brings us into a nice question, which is, do we prioritize the poor stuff first? So the poor quality silage, do we eat it first at housing and leave us good stuff later on? So we'll start with Karen, and then we can open that one.
Yeah, but I presume that question is in terms of energy. So I think that would probably be right if you can feed poorer stuff on, but it really depends on the cow condition as well, because if you're wanting to put on condition on some cows, you probably want to feed them the better quality stuff. But I think on the approach to calving, good quality silage, so you can get some good colostrum there, you're meeting the cow's energy requirements is key. I think if you're referring to poor quality silage in terms of stuff with maybe a bit of spoilage or not as palatable, I think you've got it, you have to use it. So diluting that as much as possible if it's got spoilage, diluting that spoiled material. And I think, Alwyn, I'd be right in saying earlier on, it's probably better, or feed it to something else if it's completely spoiled. But
or feed it to your young stock. Feed it to your young stock.
Ideal. The next question will be to all of us is, what is the ideal age to wean a calf? So who would like to go first on that one? Tim.
It's a good one, so I'm excited to hear everyone else's answers. But I'm not sure there is one. I'm not sure that science has delivered a 7.6 months sort of an answer to that, but maybe others will say they have. I think bigger, it's tricky, isn't it? Bigger is better. We know there's good evidence showing that the heavier the calf and the older the calf toward at weaning, those calves are at less risk of respiratory disease by and large. So we do want them to be older, but you have to balance that against the other big theme of tonight, which is body conditioning the cow and not allowing those cows to go thin. And I suppose that's the balance. And Robert, you and I have definitely talked about this before, but we often think, oh, if we just push calving back a wee while, we could get them out to, be more confident getting out to a rising, good grass quality just as they come into peak milk yield. But of course, then the calf is younger when we get to this end of the year, and it's just that balance. So I'm not sure there is one. My last point on it would be that regardless of the age of the calf, those 3 points Alwyn made about really thinking carefully around the stress on the calf, really thinking carefully about the environment it's going to land in, and about its vaccine status, it's, boosting its immune system where we can mitigate an awful lot. A younger, smaller group of calves should be able to come through a weaning very successfully if it's well planned and managed. So I'll stand to be corrected now.
That was a good brave answer to go first.
I think it depends on where the calves are destined to as well, because if you're selling weaned suckle calves, if you're weaning them 3 weeks before, while that might cause them less stress when they're actually going to their new home, it's going to make them look a bit poorer for sale. So it's a kind of balance, isn't it, for that sort of thing. But and housing, what you've got housing wise, and I think anywhere between 5 and 7 months is probably ideal, would you say?
Yeah. Certainly what I would add in there is probably it brings us back to your nutrition, or the question to you, Karen, about fit cows and good silage. If the system allows, probably certainly keeping that calf on, and delaying weaning right on in that given year for that given animal. The ideal age to wean it might be 10 months.
Yeah, so as long as the calf is getting the nutrition it needs while it's on the cow.
And actually, somebody's just come in with a point there to us all, which is basically just mirroring that it can vary between 5 and 11 months, basically depending on condition. Tim, there's a lot of folk discussing now moving right to 6-week calving periods and being going to extremes. Is that something you would be advising people to do at the moment? Is that something we should all be heading towards?
If you're sitting at 14 weeks, I don't think we go to 6 weeks next year. You'll have a very small herd, or be buying in an awful lot. So I think it really depends where we're starting from, and is it aspirational to do it? That's probably I'd like to look at the economics of it. It certainly will be for some. The calving period is intensive. It's tiring. Shortening it down, I think, is an attractive thought, isn't it? That we put that period as short as possible, and certainly bringing through a block of calves which are as tight as that together does alleviate some of the health issues that we've discussed at length over this series, from early scours, respiratory disease, and now back at the weaning. So yeah, I think there's an argument to say that it is desirable, but I don't think the trouble with when now it's 6 weeks and it was going to be 5 weeks and 4 weeks and 3 weeks, and then somebody's just where does it end? Wherever you are this year, there's probably an advantage to tightening it a bit certainly towards 12, certainly towards 9. I'm not too worried for most of us. If we can get to 6 and you want to, then yeah, there could be some advantage. But let's just go from 13 to 12 this year, 12 to 11 next, 11 to marginal wins are probably more attractive to me. If we all moved a couple of weeks, it would make a huge impact at an industry wide without having to aspire towards 6.
And also, before you do anything, it's knowing what that profile looks like. Where are those calvings occurring? And there's 2 ends that you can alter the calving period as well. You can you can put the bull out later or bring him in earlier. So there's plenty of options.
Yeah, good man. Yeah.
But yeah, so the take-home message isn't everybody go to 6 weeks, but certainly everybody have a wee look at their calving period. And
I think that would be mine. Yeah. I think maybe others would argue no, we should be, but yeah, I think step by step. Yeah. So Tim, you're getting the treatment just now, actually, but we're coming back to you. Dynamic health planning. If we've got there's a lot of herds out there or a lot of farms out there have got a spring herd and an autumn herd. Is that 2 separate health plans, or is that what does that look like when you've got 2 different systems? Yeah, I can only speak for myself, but I would need to do that separately. I would need to think through where they are at and plan out my next 4 months in 2 separate thought processes. They're at completely different ends of their production cycle. They're facing quite different threats at different times of the year. When you need to bring in vaccine is going to vary between those 2 herds. So for me, yeah, I need to do that separately. There's clearly going to be a lot of overlap. And the good thing about all health planning is the first year in a way is the most difficult, as in that's when you're staring at a blank piece of paper. But on year 2, you've got the stuff you wrote down last year to draw from and tweak and improve on. And likewise, if you've got a spring and an autumn herd, then maybe arguably start with your spring herd now when you're weaning them. But when you come to do your autumn herd in the start of the year, you'll have a pro forma there, at least a baseline to start from. So yeah, it needs to be 2 separate thought processes for me, and but there'll clearly be some overlap.
And there's an excellent point coming from the floor there, actually, to say that it's not 2 systems if you're slipping cows from the spring into the autumn. So there's challenges there, but how to capture it's a bit of a challenge. again, another one from the floor, which I'll try and make it as a statement, but I'll try and make it into a bit of a question just to get it out there, because it's a good one. So if we've got a wider calving pattern, so a wider calving spread, it allows us to wean in several groups, so we can wean several times throughout the year, which will reduce overall stress. Would that be fair comment, Alwyn? Have you anything you'd want to add to that?
So you've got smaller groups of calves being weaned at a time. Could perhaps be less stressful, perhaps. I'm trying to think it through now in my head of kind of why we might see less stress. Possibly, yeah. I mean, maybe the fact that they're just smaller groups, and there's. I'm trying to think if there are any other.
Certainly,
you guys want to help?
In sheep, there's certainly a strong relationship with a lot of the stress at weaning time for sheep isn't. So there's a big stress in losing your mum, but there's also a big stress in losing your sibling and your peers from your group. So they've built a relationship with, that whole family of sheep. I don't know, I'm comparing species here, and that's always dangerous, but I do wonder whether if you've got, if you're weaning in that batch, if we can keep them together as a group, does that help with weaning stress?
Yeah.
I think
maybe
it's a good point, but I think there's a sort of a similarity. We've just criticised, or at least leaned towards criticising the idea of letting cows slip from spring to autumn, but a seasonal herd, to some extent, at least on the economics, is largely defined by the day of weaning. We're working towards a set date and having the cattle at a set weight by that time and cows back in calf by that time. Once you extend your calving pattern and say, it's okay because I'm going to wean in batches, in a way you're actually saying, I've got 3 herds here. I've got a herd that calves in March, a herd that calves in April, or whatever, extend it out a bit. And so the same criticism could be applied. Okay, you might argue I've got nice small batches of calves for weaning, but if you've got cows that are slipping round through that extended calving window, so clearly not hitting a 365 day interval and giving you less calves than they should do over their lifetime, then I would argue you're at great risk of masking quite significant economic losses with a big wide calving window. And the argument on batch weaning, we can batch wean in a tight calving system if they've been grazed or grouped paddock grazed in batches, then we can still batch wean. So I'm not convinced by it myself that there's a strong argument for that. I think we're letting ourselves off the hook if we'll lose track of cows as they slip round.
Aye. And I think that the simple system's easy to manage, and the more complexity we add in, the more challenges tend to come with it as well. So it's certainly open for discussion. There's not going to be any concrete or final answer to that. Where are we going now, Karen? Lean cows. We were actually discussing something similar to this today, but there are areas of the country, particularly my part of the world, southwest Scotland, being particularly dry, short of grass. Cows aren't necessarily rolling fat. There's some lean cows out there. What role does creep feed have in there? Does the creep actually take the pressure off the cow, or should we be creeping with a view to wean the calf as soon as possible?
Well, that's a good question. I was probably coming from the viewpoint of East Coast cows, which are usually fatter than West Coast cows. It's a good point. But by the time, as I said on Tuesday, by the time a calf is 6 months old, 3/4 of its nutrition comes from other sources other than milk. So providing that creep is kind of making up for the shortfall in grass for the calf. Whether it takes much pressure off the cow is debatable. So I think it's getting the calf onto creep with the view to wean earlier, I think, to save that cow's condition would be my viewpoint on it.
Yeah, and certainly with regard to for that, the sooner that lean cow's wean, the better chance she's got of recovering.
Yeah. I mean, the calf is still going to pester her for a few litres of milk, even if she is on creep, the calf's on creep feed and everything else. So yeah. I don't think it's going to take much pressure off that cow.
And the more time is spent on it gets creep fodder, the better the rumen develops as well.
Yeah,
That'd be fair
absolutely.
to say as well. So by the time it's actually weaning, its rumen will be
ready to go.
ready to go.
Yeah, and I think if grass availability is poor, the price of creep feed is still economical to do that with, and then get them onto a system if forage availability is poor.
Yeah. Cool. Final two questions. One, we were actually too late to answer in the first meeting, so we're now at the last meeting and coming round the circle. So when do we want to have cows in ideal condition for calving? When is the point that we want to stop reducing or increasing condition? So Karen first, I think.
I would have said 6 weeks before, something like that. Yeah, 6 weeks before calving at least. And to be honest, though, you can keep, if you've got really fat cows, you can continue losing a wee bit of weight off them as long as their protein and their mineral requirements are met. You can have a wee bit of slide on there, but not any dramatic decreases or increases in that stage. You're just going to end up with problems. So,
yeah, cool.
Yeah, the amount. Just to add to that, the amount of demand on the cow in the last 6 weeks is the greatest, isn't it?
Yeah. So there's only so much you can put up with. I mean, if you're really limiting, or something's going to give, isn't it? Whether it's colostrum quality or her own metabolic status. So I think it's yeah.
And I suppose with that point in mind, Tim, Alan, when do we start that cow that's PD'd early in calf with twins? When do we start treating her differently to the rest? Can she run with the rest until the last 6 weeks, or do we treat her differently throughout?
I think in the initial stages, I think you're fairly safe to run her with the rest. But would that be right, Karen? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Defer to you for expert advice, but
yeah.
But late in the last trimester, then they would need to be thinking about increasing the amount of protein and energy.
Yeah, I mean, you always see them, no matter whether you've scanned them or not, you see them kind of in late pregnancy, these cows that are always a bit lean, and you think, yep, there's something, either twins or something else going on there, isn't there? So if you fail to catch her, or you can't separate them, put her in with the lean cows, and if you can't do that, make sure you really feed her well after calving. Yeah. So but if possible, catch her before, though.
Yeah. Excellent. A question for Tim: how important is it to keep cows clean? After weaning, straw is expensive. How important is it to keep them clean at this stage?
So
I should say, I mean, this stage being probably like November.
Yeah. You certainly want to watch for seeding mastitis, isn't it? We want to keep the udder clean as they start milk generating and they start bagging up, but most of us would be a good way off of that at that stage. We possibly can push it a bit. The risk, I think, is on those environmental bugs that can get into the system and cause abortion, either by ingestion or by ascending infection through the vulva. So it's certainly not ideal to have them really mucky, and a clean cow to one person, and it's a wee bit subjective as well. So it's difficult to say, but no, I think obviously I need to give the standard vet answer and say, listen, we need to keep them as clean as we possibly can, but there are real and genuine threats to the performance of that animal if we push it too far.
I do wonder whether Karen's point about West Coast cows being a bit leaner, I wonder if they might also be a bit dirtier as well, just on the price of straw. I know mine probably tend to be, just because I'm too tight. But
it's actually amazing to see the differences when you go out, actually. But it's it's just, as you said, it's subjective. Everyone's got a different viewpoint on it.
Yeah, but good points there, Tim. Just as joking aside, it's important to keep them sociably clean, I think, would be the answer. But so basically there's good points coming in all over the place at the moment, and hard to capture them all, so I think we'll just draw a line under things just now, and that basically concludes tonight. I hope tonight's been useful. The purpose of tonight was to bring us back to the start. Hopefully we get to go again and have more discussions with you later into Calving 2022, but with all that still to discuss. So I as I say, hopefully you found tonight useful, but also hopefully the whole programme's been of interest and been of some use. I know I've certainly thoroughly enjoyed working with these three guys and getting these messages out. I hope to that we have had a positive impact on Calving 2021. I was doing some very rough numbers there. I think we've had about 750 different people have logged on to these events in total. Some of them are repeat customers, but it's been a really really well received, and it's certainly testament to Tim, Karen and Alan's hard work. So a big thanks to them, and also a thanks to everybody that's come along. Just really to highlight the importance of feedback. So I certainly would like to run events like this in the future, but we need to know where you guys want it to go, or where participants want it to go. So your feedback's really important. And yes, positive feedback's always great, but certainly there's comments boxes available in the feedback form we'll send out to you tomorrow. It's really good to hear what you'd want to see more of, or what you want to see a bit less of as well. So yeah, it'd be good to get some feedback from you and help us steer into the future. We also, just to highlight as well, Alan and others produced the Calving Poster that many of you have seen. A very useful resource that was produced through this programme as well. So if there's more interest in things like that have certainly a positive impact on the industry, it's good to hear that as well. So include the Calving Poster in your feedback as well. With that, as I say, an email comes out tomorrow. It's a very straightforward survey monkey. Please do take 2 minutes to put 2 minutes to the side and fill it out. Val will send it out about 9 o'clock tomorrow. And with that, I'll say thank you again. I think I've probably done that enough, but a big thank you to UIF and the Scottish Funding Council for funding these events. And once again, thank you to everybody that's been involved. So all the best. Good evening.